I'm Jason. I'm with the All Things Open team. We're here with Don. Please introduce yourself.
So my name's Don Shin. I'm the founder and CEO of CrossComm. We're an emerging technology consultancy and app development studio located right in downtown Durham, North Carolina. And it's been something I've been doing for the past 25 plus years now.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Well, we know you're interested in AI. And so the first thing I want to ask is, where are we on the kind of evolution when it comes to generative AI?
So when it comes to looking at the evolution of generative AI, there's two ways to look at it. First is technological, and second is commercial.
Okay.
On a technological level, I think that, well, I don't know if OpenAI is going to produce artificial general intelligence anytime soon or not. Maybe they will, maybe they won't, but it's clear to me, and I think it's evident that there's still a ways to go in terms of large language models getting a lot better.
Yeah.
And that's just evidenced by the amount of news, the amount of developments, the amount of frontier and generalist models that are being released lately now with ChatGPT 4.0 Mini. I think the pace is something that I have not seen amongst all the emerging technologies I've tracked in my several decades long career. Generative AI has been moving the fastest. So clearly, I think on a technological level, there's still legs. And I would say that there's legs on a commercial adoption level as well. What we've seen is that the pace of progress on the technology has been so intimidating. It's kind of put business decision makers on a back foot because they don't know where to get in. They're playing conservative. They don't know if whatever they decide to adopt is going to become outdated a year later. But a company called Ramp, which produces virtual credit cards for employees, they released some financial data for corporations. And it looks like year over year, companies are investing 2 to 3 times more on AI expenditures compared to second quarter of last year.
Interesting.
So it looks like what we've got is increasing momentum on the adoption level of actually seeing these tools being used in everyday lives and work. And that's really, really exciting because we look all around us and we can see that there's clearly a ton of use cases where AI has not yet penetrated or made a difference yet.
Yeah.
So there's still a ways to go. I would say looks like we're still in an AI bubble, but if the applications continue to progress at the rate that they are, maybe you can actually sustain the bubble for quite some time longer.
All right. We'll have to keep an eye out for it.
Yeah.
You mentioned LLMs. Can you tell us what that is?
Sure. Large language models are basically machine learning models that have been trained on extremely large bodies of text and language data and content. Think entire Wikipedia, entire internet. And what that allows a machine learning model to do, which has predictive qualities, is it basically creates an auto-completion engine on steroids.
Okay.
That exhibits emergent abilities that are surprisingly intelligent.
Yeah.
So think you ask a question, and because it is that auto-completion engine on steroids, it provides an actual intelligent answer most of the time.
Yeah.
And with the latest large language models, not just text responses and text auto-completions, but also image, audio, video, other forms of media, with the latest multimodal large language models. So it's a really incredible tool that is not only going to be really valuable for white collar professions, creative class professions, but also is going to serve as a foundation for other artificial intelligence applications to come.
Okay. So follow up to that. Why are building applications with an open source approach important when we talk about these large language models?
When it comes to talking about open source and large language models, the term open source is already being used in a diverse number of ways. Does open source mean that the large language model is free to use and the weights are free to fine tune? Or does it mean that the actual training data that was used to train the large language model is actually available and auditable and reviewable by the public? I think both are important. And it's important for the same reason why open source has been a key foundational priority for a lot of the software that our everyday lives, our businesses, and our infrastructure is based on. And that is when software is open source, it becomes reviewable, it becomes auditable, and therefore over time just inherently becomes more secure
Right.
and more reliable and trustworthy. And so when you're developing mission critical applications or developing applications for which societal infrastructure is based upon, you need that trustworthiness. That's going to become important for that same principle as artificial intelligence and generative AI specifically become more foundational to our everyday work and lives. That software is going to have to be trustworthy. And the ecosystems surrounding large language models are also going to have to be trustworthy because, unfortunately, large language models are still prone to hallucinations, and they're still prone to what's called prompt injections, the manipulation of the prompts that leads to the generation of the content. And so for that reason alone, if you're going to build, if you're going to have devices, if you're going to have software, if you're going to build applications that leverage the output of generative AI, you need that entire ecosystem to be trustworthy and dependable and secure.
Got it. Well, on the same theme of trustworthiness, what do organizations need to consider when they're utilizing third-party LLM services?
When considering using third-party LLM services, I would say look at the terms and conditions.
Okay.
Look at the terms of service. Look to see if that service, whether they're using AI now or plan to use AI in the future, has a right to use whatever data you are sharing with that organization or that service for their training data. Ask yourself the question, do you care? And if you care, is there an opt-out clause to allow your data to not be used for that purpose? Even if there's an opt-out clause, ask yourself the question, do you trust that opt-out clause? And do you even have the luxury of trusting an opt-out clause? Or do you need to take into account compliance, regulatory issues, privacy issues, legal issues that would prohibit you from sharing such data with a third-party LLM service? That's not to say that you can't use generative AI. You can, but you may want to then consider, instead of using a third-party service, to potentially maybe host a large language model on a private instance or an instance that you're in control of within your AWS or cloud-based space. Those are all options that still allow you to use the technology, generative AI, while taking into account those terms of service.
Great. Well, thanks for those thoughts to consider when people are looking at that. So why is it important for the training model to be open source?
It's important for the training data of a model to be open source because of several reasons. Firstly, copyright. I think for corporations to cover their butts, they need to feel confident that they're using large language models that generate data where the issue of copyright is covered and the generated content is also not violating any copyright law. Secondly is provenance. So just knowing where the information is coming from is really valuable. But also I think something that we all need to take into account is that the training data is really a reflection of humanity, and that includes our biases, unfortunately. And so by having access to the training data and to be able to review it, to be able to audit it, we collectively as a society can do as good of a job as possible to make sure that we're improving the bias situation and making sure that the original training data is objective and however we decide it should be objective. I know that's debatable, but you can't get to a better output unless we all collectively try to reduce bias, whether it be racial bias, gender bias, etc.
Got it. Well, thanks for that input. Appreciate it.
Hey, this is Todd with All Things Open. Thank you so much for watching. We truly appreciate it. Also, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification button. We've got a lot of new content coming we think you're going to be interested in. One final favor, be sure to go to allthingsopen.org, allthingsopen.org to see everything that we do. Back to the video.
Are there any best practices that you want to share with the ATO community that can save them time or help them get started more quickly with Gen AI or some of this technology that we're talking about?
One recommendation I would be is when considering generative AI, to look at the frontier generalist models first. I'm not saying that there isn't a case or there aren't opportunities to use specialty models or to potentially train your own specialty model, but the the generalist models, the big tech are pouring in tons and tons of money to make these generalist models better.
Okay.
And in some cases, the generative models, the generalist models perform just as well or even better than specialty models. You may have heard of the instance where Bloomberg trained their own large language model on their proprietary data called Bloomberg GPT. And it was an interesting direction to take things, but it turns out that the generalist models like OpenAI's ChatGPT-4 as well as Llama 3 can actually answer financial questions better than the specialty model that they trained.
Yeah.
So I would say, again, it's not that there aren't use cases for those specialty models, but try the generalist frontier models first. The second recommendation I would make that sounds a little bit in contradiction to the first is, yes, consider the generalist models, but also recognize that you don't have to go with what's most popular and known in the public space, like the highest parameter large language model for your business use case. In fact, taking that route could actually be not only slower, but actually more costly than what's appropriate for your project. In many cases, a quantized large language model or even a small language model that is lightweight could quite suffice for whatever business application you're considering. And so don't be afraid to experiment and push past your assumptions around what's most frequently talked about in the large language model space. Oh, it's Llama, it's ChatGPT-4. Sometimes if you're running your own instance of a large language model, something that is more lightweight could actually suffice quite well.
Got it. Yeah. I was going to say, it sounds like you're encouraging people to experiment. Is that to see what the different results they could get from the different models?
That's in part a reason to experiment would be to see how large language models produce different results. But an unavoidable consideration is cost when it comes down to your project, because the operating costs of large language models is not insignificant.
Got it.
So right now we've got, for one of our projects that we've developed for a client, American Cancer Society, we have a large language model running in a private space. And it's actually the lowest powered GPU compute that Amazon Web Services offers. And it's because what we found is that the language model that we're using for our particular use case performs quite well, even under that environment. And so we're able to save our client hundreds, potentially thousands of dollars if we had decided to go do overkill. And so experimentation is not only necessary for examining the quality of the output, but sometimes the quality of the output is sufficient, and maybe going with a lower cost solution can make the large language model solution more sustainable cost-wise over the long run.
Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, I've been super busy lately.
That's all good. Yeah.
I barely had enough time to think through the questions you sent me, to be honest.
It's all good. Well,
but I hope the answers are helpful and interesting to somebody.
Everything's been great. Don, thanks for your time today. I really appreciate it.